Hello and welcome back to another episode of Patrox Radio. Of course, I'm your host, Patrox, but today I have a personal friend of mine who's going to be a guest on the show today. He's been eager to come on and kind of get a little more info as to not only solar punk ideas as a whole, the aesthetics and the idea of collectivist movements, but just in general to kind of dissect a bit more about what we do discussion wise and what we have planned for the future. And I thought it would be a good opportunity to kind of help people understand a little bit more on the whole general scope of what we want to focus on. So today I've got my buddy Emil. Emil, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty all right. I'm doing pretty well. I'm
Nice.
super eager to be here. Or super, yeah,
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 super eager to be here. That's fine.
yeah, yeah. Really excited.
Nice. So as a whole, like I know we've talked a little bit at work and just in our personal life about, some of the things that I've focus on or like the things that I'm doing. Even right before the recording, I was showing off a bit of, the recycling and composting I try to do.
Yeah,
Because I personally, I just felt like not doing it at this point was just an excuse to be lazy on kind of broader actions that we take. But that was really more for me, and conversing with people has been a mixed bag of opinions. And so coming from somebody who is not as mentally invested as I have been, I've just been kind of curious as to your perspective because everyone's got their own opinions, some positive, some negative
yeah,
about not only lifestyle changes but just general habits or general intentions to try to make things better.
yeah.
You know,
Very true.
but like as a whole, what do you know about the term solar punk, the idea, the aesthetics, stuff like that?
That's a fantastic question. One which I will be thinking about my answer for as I answer.
That's okay.
So I'm somewhat familiar with the term solar punk and the aesthetic of solar punk. As far as what it would take to achieve some sort of solar punk environment, I don't think anyone's 100% sure on, but I'm not 100% sure on. I know it kind of is in the same sphere or generalized sphere as say like cyberpunk, steampunk, things
Yeah.
like that. But it's something totally different at the same time.
Right, right.
It's more,
So well, as a general whole, I mean those are all kind of just aesthetics and literary devices.
yeah, yeah,
So a way that a lot of people express their art and opinions of the current state of affairs, but there's also a unique thread that follows through a lot of these things is that there's also a certain worldview or mindset that's adopted by a lot of these, and that's one of those things that makes kind of the idea of using the term solar punk unique to me. Because although I've run into people who still want to just use it in the scope of aesthetics and art visuals and writing and stuff like that, I've come to acknowledge that it requires more direct action and collectivist involvement, which is part of the reason that I don't agree with a lot of people who try to make communities like this and they only want to show off digital AI art pieces that they'll make from Dolly 2 or something. And I'm just like, that doesn't feel adequate, you know?
yeah. No, I would agree. I feel like to do something like solar punk, just the name itself, solar punk, sounds like it's kind of driven by a cooperation between people across different communities, but cooperation between people and their environment as well. Because, I mean, just the name itself, solar
Right.
punk.
Well, I mean, as far as definitions go, everyone can use any variety of them, even self-described ones. There's one I pulled up that describes it not only as like a sci-fi subgenre that tries to successfully combine nature and technology visually, but also it wants to envision an environment where we have such cohesion with nature and in our infrastructure in our daily lives. It's an aesthetic that grow. It's an online aesthetic that grows into an ideology that has resembled elements of socialist action and more anarchistic action. Things like permaculture action that doesn't require um, such bureaucratic processes as like local governance, as in people just see a spot, they want to go beautify it with native plants and stuff. They plan to do it, buy the ingredient or buy the plants, and then they'll plant it themselves. And this will be like some shoulder that's off the feeder of a highway or something like that, to like completely taking over a park space in the middle of a city or a town, something like that. So direct action and collectivist work seem to be important elements, which takes it beyond just something to slap onto your story or your painting to make it feel more than what's at the heart of it.
Right.
Which it's not to say that we shouldn't encourage more artwork into that level, because it's what inspires a lot of younger people to look more or to get creative or to focus on different things. The art that we create has that level of impact.
Right.
You know,
Absolutely.
there's a much cleaner definition down here that I like. It says solar punk is a subgenre of speculative fiction and collectivist social movement that envisions the progression of technology alongside the environment. While the solar prefix signifies the term's relation to the solar or renewable energy, the punk suffix groups with other aesthetic sci-fi subgenres like cyberpunk, dieselpunk, and steampunk. Which again it feels like a very broad explanation,
Yeah.
which is why, for my purposes, I do specifically say eco-socialist activism, which includes things like conservation efforts, which includes things like circular economic practices, which includes things like, as boring as it is, going to town meetings and getting your voice heard on important issues. Worrying about the youth vote when you're youth yourself, XYZ, because it requires a more democratic process to everyday living, whether it's in the workspace or it's, with local policies. So that's what I personally describe it with. And so let's try to simplify that, just for everyone else, because there's a lot of things that are being said. Let's focus it on three spheres, if you will. We got the realm of direct environmental impact and action that I want to highlight a lot. There is leftist politics, which a lot of people don't want to get into because they don't want to get themselves emotionally invested into politics. But unfortunately, it's an important roadblock to uncover when dealing with these issues,
Yeah.
as because it's not always an issue of people just not caring. Sometimes there's actual laws that inhibit things, such as the types of buildings you can build and where. As stupid as it is, that really affects a lot of land management issues.
Yeah.
And then the last one being local economies, because I don't believe that there should be a heavy emphasis on such centralized industries that are held in power or in place by almost monopolistic, like corporations. This could be anything from your power energy being held by CenterPoint to your clothes and food coming from one place, Walmart or Costco or something like that. So being able to invest heavier into your local economies tends to also be, on par with what you want with a world like this. More dependency from your local area and more trust and more faith can be put into your local area like that, because you know where your food's coming from, who's growing it, who's handling your materials and supplies, who's built your roads, XYZ. But there's so many steps that it takes from getting from here to there, you know. And with all this being thrown at you, kind of what are things you've already kind of either known or experienced prior to this, related to these fields?
Well, related to these fields,
Things that you've taken a personal interest in or cared about.
I honestly have taken a personal interest in, one thing that you mentioned just a little bit ago, the legality of it all.
Yeah,
The,
legality. We
yeah,
talk a lot about that at work, about some of the local laws or just kind of federal issues that we've seen without
yeah,
without getting into the politics themselves.
yeah, exactly. Trying to, I guess, whenever petitions are, made known and whatnot, trying to get my name on those and whatnot, just because there are certain things that could potentially change the way that we affect the environment around us in a legal sense, and in that sense also, affect our communities and micro communities within said community as well.
Right.
And if it's basically affecting the environment is something that's possible, but doing so legally makes it a lot easier.
Right. So a lot of that will stem from people understanding things like policies, things like, local elections, get them knowing what direct policies are affecting their schools, their housing, their, grocery stores, blah blah blah.
Like you
You
said,
know.
building zoning and oil
Right.
pipelines and gas lines and all that stuff. Yeah.
Right, but here's the problem. This is information that is boring to almost every single person. So
Yeah.
I think you have to, unless you're crazy like me and just truly fucking care that much, you have to find a way to deliver the same information to people in a way that is more digestible or palatable for them, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm not going to get an 18-year-old to care about, Houston's mayor election whenever he's more worried about who's going to the Super Bowl in February.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen, and I understand that. But at the same time, when you have things like city council meetings that are predominantly either empty or only held or like only listening to people who are 40 plus years old because those are the only people willing to go out there in their free time to be heard because they live in these areas and they're invested, all you have are these older and often outdated opinions, even if they mean well, even if they truly do care.
Yep.
Because there's more than enough videos of city council meetings going fucking haywire out there in the past few years, just spewing off nonsense. For those who genuinely do care and they're genuinely out there, they try to raise their voices and concerns about things. But if we don't educate younger people and get younger people out there more, we're missing the potential to point out real life issues to the people who make the decisions that matter.
Yeah,
That's what it
no,
boils down to.
absolutely.
We're missing the direct line of dialogue
Yeah.
to people who make these decisions.
Yeah.
And then we want to get mad and then say like, oh well, they just fucking don't care about us. Oh well, they're gonna keep stealing my money anyways. Oh well, they're gonna give this money to immigrants to go do other things or to people who don't deserve it. Whatever the rhetoric is.
Yep.
As much as you could fight that rhetoric all day long, but it means nothing if you're not going to go out there and talk about it.
Absolutely.
It's funny because as I'm mentioning it, it's actually something a friend of mine is kind of calling me out on because he's going to a city council meeting to talk about bike lanes and transportation on the metro lines and everything.
Oh, nice.
Well, yeah, but he's the only person talking about it. I think like literally, if he didn't sign up, there was nobody signed up to talk about it, and they were going to cancel the city council meeting.
Wow.
Seriously. And it's like things like that. It's like I didn't even know that. And we're talking about Houston.
Yeah.
We're not talking about down here closer to where I live. We're talking about Houston proper, Harris County.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, these are this is the fourth largest city by population and third largest by landmass, I believe.
Yeah.
And we aren't talking about these important issues. Isn't Houston literally the laughing stock about transportation?
Literally, yeah.
Not only just transportation, but just road infrastructure.
Oh yeah.
It's funny what we aren't willing to pay attention for and what we're willing to bitch about often is the same thing.
Very true. Very true.
But it's things like that. If you have an investment in your local infrastructure, you'll have a boost in things like your local economy because you'll have people who have more money, not only because they do things like ride a more reliable metro that's on a road that's not filled with potholes because you have less people driving on it and is less abusive to the road.
Yep.
Because now you have people that can get to work on time, which means that there's more money and more work being done locally that doesn't have to be shipped out and exported because it's cheaper, blah, blah. These are things that build and compound on each other, and there's a lot of positive things that can come from it if we do it right.
Absolutely.
I can't tell you how many times I hear about people who say go into construction, there's always money. And they never stop to think that the reason that there's always money is because they're willing to do bullshit jobs just to keep getting contracts.
Yeah.
They aren't willing to do the harder part like an architect or a city planner to actually just think, is this what we actually need? Yeah. No, they'll just say, hey, just one more lane on the highway. Come on, we can do it. We can knock it out. It'll make things better. But it never does. It gets them paid because it gets them work. And then city council gets to brag about that, or whatever politician gets to brag about that and say, look, we got these jobs, we got infrastructure built, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, no, you pissed around and wasted money,
Literally,
you
yeah.
know?
If you look at, I forgot what city it is in Sweden. I wish I could remember. They, back in the 70s, so they've been doing this for like over 50 years, but they turned a lot of their stroads, like a lot of what we have here in the U.S. and
I'm so
especially in
glad you know
Houston.
that because
Yeah.
I say that word and a lot of people don't know what the fuck I'm talking about.
Yeah, there's so basically we have a lot of stroads where it's supposed to be like a street and a road combined where you have residential areas and small businesses, but it's like the speed limit of like a small highway or something like
Right.
that, and you can't really cross it. There's no sidewalk, nothing like that. We've all walked across those things where it's like street, little patch of grass, ditch next to it, no room to walk. But this one place in Sweden, actually, it might be the entire country. Anyway, they decided to do away with their stroads, and they have streets, and then they have little offshoots, little exits that connect to roads. You know, where the speed limit reduces, and you have your residential areas and whatnot, and then you have another exit where you can go from the road back onto the street, and it picks back up, you know, and everything like that. I feel like things like that are very impactful. And if you do something like that, you won't have to constantly negatively affect one's community because everyone wants to complain about something like that. But I feel like no one wants to really look up why it's important. I feel like if people would just take maybe 10 minutes to try to get into, and that's something that I have to do myself. If we would just take 10 minutes to read up on something, you know, learn more about it little by little, then we'll
Right.
get more interested in
Not
it.
just take whatever spoon fed to you about it.
Absolutely, because if you take whatever spoon fed to you about it, then
All
you're
you're going to
just
have is other people's opinions.
absolutely, you're not going to build your own opinion. It's kind of like I don't know the professor's name, but it kind of relates to what this one professor said. If you don't learn your own narrative, you're going to believe someone else's narrative where the heroes kind of, you know, look or think like them and the villains look or think like you. You know.
Yeah, it's a whole cascading problem that just it builds upon itself, and it's an issue, you know. But I wanted to touch on something that you mentioned, you know, stuff like infrastructure and plans like that. Something that you said made me think about all like the neighborhoods that get bought out just to build, you know, a new extension of a highway or a
Yes.
park. An example that I learned that I think should be a lot more famous is Seneca Village from New York. You know, it was a neighborhood, an all black neighborhood that was bought out and torn down to build Central Park, I believe.
Yeah. Yep.
Yep. You know, and it's stuff like that. It's like untold history that literally affects people's day to day lives.
Literally.
And
Yeah.
what happened? They made decisions that were legally based off the law and whatever they felt was economically advantage. But we all also know that these were based off of very racist laws and policies that led to
Absolutely.
these decisions and racist fucking people who make those decisions then and there.
True.
You know, there's a reason why these always tend to target 90% a minority demographic.
Yep.
You know, so also understanding how wider politics and you know the social culture, the social zeitgeist, understanding these things on a more intrinsic level is unfortunately also one of the necessities. You know, because then you could also explain why you have people who don't care about, you know, say something like the environment because they feel like maybe their internal reason is that they feel like they can pay their way out because they're used to the capitalist myth.
Yeah.
You know, that if there is a need, there is, you know, somebody willing to sell it, you know, or sell you the cure for that or fill in the gap. When it comes to, you know, the politics that really dictate a lot of, you know, the social fabric, it requires a level of understanding that's a lot more fine-tuned than what we have. And that is also exacerbated by, you know, dwindling school grades and education system in America. It is done with the social fabric that is designed not only within our school systems but in our everyday lives. Things like credit scores that often are negatively affecting people who are not born white and rich.
True.
If it negatively things like you know, the school system is structured to be built around working factory hours, so you are conditioned to be used to being a worker.
Yep.
Not only talking about like since the 80s, since Reagan lifted the what was it? it was like a fairness doctrine for reporters, so that way they got to be a lot more biased and a lot less regulated.
Yeah.
Which also allowed businesses to influence in mass the public on more right wing talking points and economic thinking. So now, 50 years on, we are so saturated with this thinking, we can't even fathom something different.
Yeah.
And these things, again, they just compound on each other. And there's so many people who want to think of these things in a vacuum. And as appealing as that is, I think that comes at the greatest cost when you want to think of these problems in a vacuum.
Yeah.
Because then you don't realize the dominoes that are all falling around you because of it.
Yeah. People like to look at things through a lens that they are used to, and strictly through that lens. And as humans, I feel like we all naturally have some sort of bias, but I feel like if someone truly cares about something, then they will be more open-minded, and they will be open to accepting, genuine criticisms and viewpoints from other standpoints and through other lenses.
Right. It's also kind of one of those things that I think, like, with whatever you want to do and however you talk about things, I think your bias comes first, but your intentions come second. Because you can, have an inherent bias, but who you are, if you, like, say we were having a conversation and I just say, like, the most out of nowhere racist shit. And then, like, I take that second and be like, no, that's not right. That's not me, and that's not what we're doing. The understanding and giving people that moment to catch themselves before you call them out on things, whether it's about, racist shit, whether it's about knowledge on environmental impact, whether you're getting onto them about wanting a better world, but they're too lazy to fucking get up off the couch. Not like a depressed kind of thing. They just genuinely are too lazy.
Yeah, they're just
it's
lazy.
like... I understand the initial, like, outburst, but if people do have a moment where they're like, no, you're right, that's not how it should be. I think there's not enough people who give individuals that break. There's not that sense of compassion to be like, this person is a normal human being that can fuck up.
Yeah.
Yes, there is a limit to what you should allow, of course, But there's also, like, I'm not gonna let somebody constantly talk down to me for being bi, but at the same time, if they have a moment to be like, you're pretty cool, maybe I'm wrong, if you can give them that moment, I think a lot more can be done.
Yeah, I feel like if people were more compassionate and were more open-minded towards other people, if they, were just like, oh, hey, this person has something going on that I know nothing about, or that I haven't had to deal with, or whatever, I feel like there would be more of a genuine view of other people from any given person. I feel like, as a society, we would be less unnecessarily judgmental and more helpful and cooperative towards each other, instead of, having, like, what you said, like, racist tendencies and being like, periwinkle people are always drinking smoothies.
So just some stupid nonsense like that. Yeah. Like, everyone has, varying degrees of things that they can learn.
Absolutely.
But it's also, people need to assume the responsibility to do better.
Yes.
Is the other thing. It's like, because, yes, we could always talk about how we approach things, but I also think that, especially in leftist talking circles, we have the habit of doing one or two things. We give too much apologia to people who don't deserve it, and we give too much shit to people who just want to point something out. Yeah. Or could just be wrong because either they don't know better, or they're just a troll, or they're 16 and they're still learning shit,
True.
They haven't fully formed, intelligent opinions to that degree yet.
Oh, man.
I can understand that, but... we as a species, and especially on a species who's terminally online, we're way too personal and reactionary to shit like that.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just not productive for any of us. And that's just kind of one of those things. It's like, you could point out any of these issues as a big issue, and most people don't want to care about one or the other, which is kind of one of those things that I like focusing on the environmental impact of everything as a whole, because that is something that's universal. And if you still deny that, I got nothing for you. I truly have nothing for you. You
Yeah.
know, maybe, economic factors are not a thing for you, or not a good discussion for you because you make 75,000 a year, okay? Maybe racial issues aren't an issue for you because you're a privileged white male. It happens. Even if you're not a privileged white male, you can still fall into a lot of that issues. I
Yeah.
see it all the time. I see it with my Latin family. I see it with a bunch of my black friends and their family too from time to time.
Yeah.
I see it with a bunch of Asian families that I'm
Hmm.
friends with. It's like I don't think we are willing to let ourselves think for a moment, hey, I can fuck up just as bad.
Yeah.
I think that's really at the heart of it, is that we're prideful people. We don't
Yeah.
like to often think that we're the problem,
Yeah.
you know. But I think if we're going to get anything done in any of these areas, this is helping, local economies and local systems. Whether you want to help with general politics to make things better in the cultural zeitgeist, if you want to genuinely make good impacts on helping the environment, I think taking the steps to understand not only how they're all connected, but also how you as an individual can grow and do better as a person will take you miles ahead
Mm.
of where you are now, faster than anything you can do. I genuinely think that. I genuinely believe if you can find ways to acknowledge things internally and say, hey, something about this don't feel quite right. You don't even need to think I'm the problem. You don't even need to get to that mindset of I'm the bad guy, because I think it's what a lot of people are also afraid of.
Yeah.
That saying that this is wrong is the same thing as saying as I'm bad, or some negative connotation like that.
Yeah.
And I don't think that that's healthy either, because I've heard rhetoric from people that gives me that impression.
Yeah.
You know, I just think if people are willing to say, hey, I'm human.
Mm.
What am I not understanding about this? What am I not getting right about this?
Yeah.
And you're willing to be open about that, I think that should be praised and accepted and should be normalized.
Yeah.
Not only with yourself, but with other people.
I agree.
You know?
Yeah. No, I am definitely one of those people, and it's gotten way better over the years. But I'm one of those people who, like, my whole life, super critical of myself, and
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, you look at something bad and you give everyone else so much slack, but then you look at yourself and you're like, wow, I'm a bad person, and that's you're so right. That's not healthy
No, it's
at
not.
all, and it doesn't it
Because you're making yourself an antagonist.
absolutely, and it in some cases, yeah, it can be used to help one improve, but it's not a healthy way to help one improve, and it actually kind of impedes your progress in a lot of areas.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I think that anyone who gets further ahead in anything is someone who holds themselves accountable, either by themselves, or they have someone who they trust, who they speak with and are super real with, and they
Mm-hmm.
allow their friends or whomever to hold them accountable. And something that I am very fond of saying to myself is that the greatest leaders require the most guidance, and that could be leader in any sense, whether you're talking about being a leader in your field at work or just a leader of yourself in making you know good decisions, environmentally conscious decisions, anything
Mm-hmm.
like that. I feel like people just need to be more accountable and feel comfortable
Right.
being more accountable.
And a lot of that requires people going at their own pace at the end of the day, too. I'll
Absolutely,
be
yeah,
honest, if you looked at me 10 years ago, I would be unrecognizable to what I'm trying to do now. And I think, of course, that speaks positively towards my growth, not only in intentions, but in the direction I'm headed.
yeah,
But I also think that that goes a long way to explain probably the best way to deal with something like this. There are people who are ahead in both being aware and being active and being, they feel that they should be diligent and responsible in what they do. So they're ready to work with organizations. They're ready to get out there and do something. But then there may be a bunch of people, a bunch of people, I believe, that don't fit that bill, that have a lot of internal work to do, that have to like fix themselves either habitually, or they have a lot of mental issues going on that they need to address.
yeah,
Whether it's therapy, or they need medication, or they just need support
yeah,
somehow.
absolutely,
I think it is more productive for people in this sense to just look at themselves and think, okay, what can I tangibly do? If
yeah,
this is the person I want to be, if this is what I think should be done, how do I take where I am and get there? And I think focusing on yourself becomes the first primary goal.
yeah,
I think understanding your habits go a long way, because you'll be surprised how much getting in a good routine and being good about your hygiene can seriously affect your mental health
Yeah.
to such a degree that you'll think either really good things or really bad things about yourself. And you won't even realize that that's part of it. It's just that you aren't living a lifestyle that is conducive to positive personal reinforcement.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I don't know about you, but for me, like a lot of the habits that I wanted to start as I made these changes towards things that I cared about, it was something I wanted to do at a pace that I felt was great. I don't know if you can see on this board over here, I actually wrote down how I liked to do things. I looked at restricting options of the things I buy. So, like now, I try
Nice.
my best not to buy any plastic container, doesn't matter what it is, if I can avoid it.
Nice.
That's why, if, as you saw in my recycling bins out there, there's a shitload of glass and aluminum because
Yeah.
those are easier to recycle and have much more economic sustainability and, of course, environmental sustainability than plastic does.
Yeah.
But as I can, I want to recycle what I need to. But now I'm looking to make things over buying them, such as like, let's give an easy example: seasoning packets. I don't buy seasoning packets anymore.
Oh wow.
Why? Because I use my own seasoning blends. I use them because I'm willing to experiment with flavors. Do I want to buy? Let's give another example. Like my recycling kit that I'm trying to get going, I could easily just buy a bunch of containers, but it wouldn't have suited my needs, and it would have been more costly in the end to do so.
Hmm.
So instead, this is a project that I'm making over buying. It'll suit my needs, and it will facilitate exactly what I needed in the space I needed it to occupy in a much easier manner. When it comes to food in general, is the easiest way to do that. Just buy, or just buy the ingredients to make your food. It'll be cheaper in the long run. You gain the experience of cooking, and you get to control things to be what you actually like instead of paying, $2 for a crappy cheeseburger at McDonald's because that's the cheapest thing that you have because you're too lazy to make anything,
Very
or
true.
you feel like you don't know how to cook and anything you cook is not worth the effort. And
Hmm.
it's a habit of getting out of the mental cycle there.
Yeah.
You know, things like buying from resale shops. Most of my clothes are secondhand. My
Nice.
electronics secondhand. This
Hmm.
desk, I picked it up for free. You
Nice.
know, like there are things that you can do if you let yourself be open to the ideas. Is ultimately what I was trying to get at.
Yeah.
These are processes I'd gone through over the past 3 years to get to this point, and I've still got so much more to go.
Hmm.
You know, and it's I think you should work on developing the mindset of thinking like a child and treat it all as like a new adventure. Let's say you have a futon and it broke, right? Well, if it's wood, think, okay, can I replace this wooden beam? It'll probably be cheaper than getting a whole thing. I could probably knock it out in about an hour if I got the right tools. Bam, there you go. You not only save yourself more money, you gain your new experience and skills, and you are able to lessen the environmental impact of your furniture because you increase the longevity of your products that you're using.
Very true.
There's all kinds of ways to look about it. You could also be like, hey, I'm needing to switch shampoos, but I want to make less of an impact. Is there any DIY recipes I could do at home that might be better for me to use? And then you can experiment with things like different oils, like avocado oil is actually really good for your hair too. In general, most of the DIY dry shampoo recipes I look at either use just baby powder, cornstarch, or arrowroot powder, which are all fairly easy things to get
Yeah.
and fairly cheap, and you can make that last. Now imagine how much water you're saving from not using shampoo bottles or conditioner bottles if you get bar, conditioner, stuff like that. These are little steps that you can do and comfortably at your own pace.
Yeah.
I'm not telling everyone save all your orange peels to make incense like I do. I didn't start doing that till recently. But you can start just looking at the brands that you like, looking into the brands that you use that you shop at Kroger's or Walmart or even on Amazon, and make sure that the ones that you're using have a direct correlation with the impact, and they show that. Or you're making the smart swaps. Often you don't need to swap items. The most eco-friendly option for something that you have is often the thing you already own. Think about that. Do you need a new t-shirt, or do you just need to make the one that you got work? You know, even if it's not ripped up, if it's not too small, if it's not super faded and like, getting super holy, is it ready to throw out? No. So why do you need a new piece of clothing?
Right.
Stuff like that. It's asking these questions. Do you really need this?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people also want to fall into the habit of buying a new product because they slap eco on it,
Yeah.
or that it's made out of bamboo, and it feels good. You want to feel like you can still pay your way out of it, but that's the root of the problem.
Over consumerism, basically.
Yeah, overconsumption is its own category we're talking about, but yeah, at its core, it's these behavioral conditioning things that we have done since we were kids. We never realized it, but we've been conditioned to accept this environment as the environment, as not something that is flexible to change to fit our needs better. We
True.
created it ourselves. We are in charge of it, and we forgot that.
Yeah.
You know. As far as day-to-day habits, is there anything that you've kind of noticed in your personal life that relates in any way? I'm curious to see the difference between the way I try to live my life versus somebody more average in their day-to-day approach.
Oh man, yeah. Well, I can tell you, my diet has absolutely gone to shit, and I have been trying to get back into the habit of buying groceries again.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
always a joy. Trust me.
and even that small change, because I was trying to think. I was like, um, as far as clothes and whatnot, other forms of apparel, I don't really buy those. I kind of wear my stuff till it's full of holes, which is kind of.
No, that's fine. That's more than
but
fine.
but as far as food goes, a lot of the time I just kind of make excuses and just
Yeah,
eat
I'm
when I'm.
familiar with that.
Yeah,
I do that a lot too.
and I remember I try to think of like back when I was buying groceries all the time, like a couple years ago, and I'm just like, man, I really, really enjoyed cooking all the time.
Hmm.
It was really nice experimenting and whatnot. Um, and just, you know, basically the way I live my day to day is kind of like it's pretty much like the average American does,
Right.
but there are those small habits that I'm trying to kind of correct for my own interests and the interests of those around me as well, because I've seen the difference that they make. And even if the only difference I saw was a selfish difference, the difference on my wallet, the difference on my bank account, that's still a difference that is convincing enough to try to change that habit for sure.
Right, but that's kind of one of those nuanced things that will affect people differently. Because
Yeah.
for me, switching to a more eco-concerned lifestyle has not affected my wallet necessarily positively every single time.
Right.
There are some times that it actually costs me quite a bit to make those choices.
Right.
And so for me, I found the best way to get through it was to not think of money as one of those major necessities in life.
Yeah.
Is it? Yes, it is. I'm not that ignorant. But when it stopped being the primary focus for all my decisions, it made it easier to make choices and deal with things as I needed to, so long as I still had the good habits to pay things like my bills on time and make sure that that was good. So long as money has been managed properly,
Yes.
it wasn't an issue if something's expensive. It is kind of how it was.
Proper money management is important, and
You know.
as you alluded to, so is being content.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there's one kind of through line with every decision that I make in trying to be better, and it's this belief that I have that if you truly believe that the world can be better, or you truly believe that you want the world to be better, either case, then you have the obligation to make that happen, no matter how that takes form. And me being somebody who takes it to heart, I also believe that you should do that to the greatest extent that you can.
Yeah.
Now, this is a high bar that I don't achieve in my own right, for myself. But I do think that it's at least enough motivation for me to keep going. and keep making the changes, because not making the changes would be admitting that I'm content with the way that things are.
Mm.
You
I
know,
like that. I like that a lot.
if I don't want things to be better, then I'm saying that I'm okay with this.
Yeah.
Am I okay with this? No.
Mm.
So it's not enough for me to just acknowledge it. I also have to act.
Right.
And I honestly think that, in general, you need both. You need to know why you're doing the things you're choosing to do, but also have the heart and sense of responsibility to do it, even if you don't want to, or even if you feel like you don't always know the full extent of why. Like, say, for composting, you may fucking hate composting no matter what. You could be doing it for 4 years and still fucking hate it. But if you know that it has not only lessened your direct impact, but allowed healthy soil to be reintroduced into your environment, even if you're just the kind of person to take it and just throw it into the yard or the general park or whatever, it's okay,
Yeah.
because you're reintroducing good nutrients and bacteria in your area. As a personal general practice, it would be good. And
Yeah.
so if you can acknowledge that practice and even still hate it but still do it, I think that that's a net positive. I think that that's good, because you've assumed the responsibility to try to make things better,
Yeah.
in doing what's within your own hands. Now, it's not within the scope of this episode to really talk about the next steps towards more collective action, as that requires a lot more integral discussion on not only sociology but how politics work and local organization works
Yeah.
versus international organizations or something on the scale of corporations or whatnot. And these are different skills that require different experiences, and some of them I don't have, so I'm
Right.
not the person to talk about it. But in this effort to try to grow more of a local community effort,
Mm.
or consensus to care about this, even if it's just the podcast and the information I spell out, it's giving a chance to give these ideas towards other people, you know and we'll see, because I've already talked to enough people online to know that, like, this is along the right lines and right trends of what other people are thinking,
Yeah.
and it gives me some hope, you know but as much as I'd like to think I'm the smartest guy in any room I talk to, I know that that's not the case.
But
And
hey,
so for me, a personal practice is to let my ego be put to the side and just say, like, hey, what matters? What is relevant to what we need,
right. Yeah.
you know? But we'll probably talk about that another time whenever we get into, like, the specifics of projects that I'm currently working on, and other things that we could do, or just practices that you may be getting interested in until next time. Things
Oh
that you
yeah.
want to start or questions that you have,
Ooh.
because yeah, like I said, there's all kinds of things that we could talk about. I'm currently looking into different petrochemical companies, so that way we can be consciously aware of some of these greater impacts and violations, while these companies still continue to try to rule more aspects of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
There are canvassing efforts for progressive candidates that are going on around the country, that I have some insights on, and I'm trying to help with phone banking efforts. So these are other things to talk about, political races that are going on around the country, including the one that's going to happen here later on in the year for Houston. We're having a new city council and mayoral election. So these are other things that matter too. And I want to shed lights on them, and shed whatever information we can about efforts towards that, to make things go in a more positive direction, and spread news about what's going on. Here's an update, here's the candidates that are coming in, here's the candidates that are dropping out, here's the latest news, blah, blah, blah. Here's a proposal that'll have this effect, here's a proposal that's going around that is making people feel uncomfortable, or they're feeling anxious, or they're really invested in this and they think we should go, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter. You know, at the end of the day, I hope you can see that there's a lot.
Yes.
This is a massive, broad umbrella of,
Oh
of
yes.
topics to talk about, but actions that can be taken too.
As
You know,
soon as you mention the first two topics of local versus or national versus international environmentalism and whatnot, I was like, oh man,
oh
just both
yeah,
of those things by themselves could be an entire. They could each have entire series.
Oh, absolutely. And that's kind of why, like, as much as I am eager to talk about them, I want to focus, for the sake of this podcast, at least partially on local things.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to talk about large scale things and large scale effects. You know, it's easy to talk about federal policies going through Congress, but you know that it's not the same thing as trying to talk to somebody about your county elections.
Yeah.
You know, especially whenever it could be somebody you know. There the scale of ramifications and effects are on completely opposite ends with these conversations.
Yeah.
And I want to focus on the things that don't get talked about enough. You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think
I like that a lot.
I think in this moment, it's one of those things that I'm lucky for living in Harris County because it is a large city that I can discuss things that could be kind of equated to other large cities, but at the same time, it's not treated the same like other large cities. And here we still have a lot more of the local communities and, you know, like the outer cities outside the Beltway are more focused on themselves, even though half of them still exist within Harris County and stuff like that. So they don't take the full effect of their environment into consideration. They only think about their areas. They still focus on an individualistic attitude towards things, even if it's just my city versus Houston.
And there are so many detailed reasons as to why, but that's very true. Yeah.
Right, and it matters towards things like let's take example like a petrochemical plant that's being built. It doesn't matter if it's built in Houston if it's 20 miles down the road from you and you're downwind.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? It doesn't matter. Yeah. You know, but these are conversations I've actually had with people. You know, oh, I don't live there. I live in Brazoria County. Yeah, you live 20 feet into Brazoria County. You're still downwind from these processing plants.
They're going to be just as affected.
You know? Yeah. Yes. And so it's wanting to break down the mental borders of how people separate themselves in the area.
Yeah.
It's also one of those issues that a lot of people have just asked me why I don't fucking move out of Texas. And I want to make this very clear because it's also the intent of why I have this show. Because I believe that if you run away from a problem because it doesn't suit you, then you allow the problem to fester and grow. You know, so as much as it may bother me to live in this state, if I leave, that's one less person willing to fight against it here in the heart.
Sure.
You know.
Very true.
And that's kind of what I want. I want to inspire people who don't know, people who are curious about bits of it, like you, but don't have the dedicated investment of like 4 years, 3-4 years, like I have.
Yeah.
You know, and I want to bridge that gap and help people, you know, get there faster. It's like, hey, you don't need to spend 4 years of hating yourself and fighting yourself and going down pipelines of misinformation or things that you feel are outdated or stupid.
Yeah.
You know, hey, it's okay. Ask your questions. Feel stupid. We all were there. Yeah. You know, just know that if you want to make the growth happen, there's communities out there for you.
I love it.
There's people willing to get you there. You know, but you got to be willing to care.
Absolutely.
You got to care about yourself. You got to care about the politics. You got to care about your local cities and environments. You got to care about the planet you're on.
True.
Because whether we like it or not, they're connected.
They are connected. They're very much connected. You can't. You know, one thing my mom always told me growing up, you can't do something that's not going to affect everything else.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And it's like,
Nothing happens in a vacuum.
Exactly. Nothing happens in a vacuum. You can't not affect your community, the planet, or anything else like that because you live on it. You're going to affect it. You're going to affect everything. You know? So,
you know, with that, like, there's one example that I could bring up right now. There was I think it was Swedish or Danish, like college group who was curious to see the travel of a piece of plastic, a plastic bottle in the ocean, because they wanted to see the downstream effects of it, and they were able to see this go all the way around kind of like the Nordic Peninsula, get trapped in the Arctic Ocean for a little bit, and then it went all the way down and is now cycling through the northern Atlantic stream.
Oh, that big current that goes around?
Oh. Yeah, just between like northern Europe and us.
Yeah.
You know, and it's one of those belts that traps a lot of trash, and it's like, yeah, we are affecting the habitat and ecosystem of one of the largest oxygen producing biomes that exist,
Yeah.
which is algae, kelp, sea life, plankton, phytoplankton, XYZ, like these vast ecosystems that live in the ocean, and we don't think about it, and we just keep chucking our trash,
I was about to
and we
say,
affect them, and then we fish them, and
yeah,
then it comes right
it comes
back.
right. It comes right back. Yes, exactly. That's almost a direct effect back on us.
But because we don't see it, we don't think it happens. It doesn't.
Yeah.
It can't be. No, of course
Yeah.
not. We're not all riddled with microplastics. What are you talking about?
Absolutely not.
What?
No.
Like, listen, we're all unclean and we're all riddled with
Literally.
microplastics at this point.
I mean, if kids in like kindergarten would eat glue, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't put it past us to be riddled with microplastics.
It's okay though. It doesn't seem to be killing us that fast. So I am
not that fast.
I don't want to jinx it and then come find out we have a 12% increase rate of cancer because of microplastics or some shit.
Right.
But without trying to jinx us, I think this is a good place to kind of round off and stop. Emil, I'm so glad you're able to come here, and I hope you're able to join again for other episodes.
I would love to join again for other episodes. This was incredible.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm just glad that I do have somebody else that I can talk to about, not only solar punk ideals and visuals, but just general eco-socialist impacts and discussion pieces, because most people that I discuss just want to argue against it, and they usually don't have good talking points even worth recording.
Oh.
And it's rather unfortunate.
Yeah, see, I'm always down for gaining other viewpoints and discussing and learning, so this
Right.
this is exciting. This is really, really fun.
Exactly. So I want to try to find something worth researching next time, so you can kind of also see not only how I encourage people to actually research instead of just going to Wikipedia and that's it, like actually like really dig for things.
Yeah.
Learn how to start digging through government websites or college resource sites and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Or private institutions that'll give you like think tanks and stuff like that that'll work on these reports and tests to give you these information. Because even then, you have to learn how to scrutinize it. You have to always learn how to find how they cite their sources and XYZ. But these are things I wanted to teach other people. So we'll save that for another time.
Okay.
But as a whole, I enjoy you being on here. I think this was wonderful and was a great way to show people how, even if you know nothing, you can still try. You can still care. You can still wonder. And that should be enough to have that spark to make you do better, to make you feel better, to make you have a direct action to impact your environment for the better.
I feel very inspired.
Thank you. That's my goal here. I want to inspire people.
I love it.
But as a whole, I think this is it. We're going to go ahead and go because it's also pretty late. Okay, guys, so real quick, I wanted to give you guys some updates before we go. As always, I like to use Ground News as my source to try to find information and updates from around the world of things that are important. Not sponsored, I just think it's really good. According to Reuters, Abbott Laboratories Michigan plant, which was at the center of the baby formula shortage last year, faces a criminal investigation by the Justice Department. Panicked parents emptied baby formula aisles at supermarkets last year as a recall of formulas by Abbott due to complaints of bacterial infections exacerbated a shortage that began due to pandemic-induced supply chain issues. Of course, we could go more into this, but if you're interested, please look into it. This was something that had personally affected a few of my friends and their kids early on. Luckily, we live near churches that were also stocked ahead of time, and they operate food pantries to help those in needs, and they were able to really help in in my area at the time, which again only really highlights the need for more local support and local interdependency amongst each other. Also, there's an active gunman on the loose as I record this, apparently. I'm like just getting flashed this constantly. According to KTVZ, authorities are scrambling to find whoever killed 10 people Saturday night in Montgomery Park, California, as the city's large Asian American community was celebrating Lunar New Year weekend. Quote, Montgomery Park should have had a night of joyful celebration of the Lunar New Year. Instead, they were victims of a horrific and heartless attack of gun violence, unquote, Governor Gavin Newsom tweeted. In addition to the 10 people killed, another 10 people were wounded and hospitalized, Los Angeles County Sheriff Robert G. Luna said. Quote, who walks into a dance hall and guns down 20 people, unquote. Here's what we know. Early information suggests the shooter may be an Asian male, the sheriff said. Quote, the description we have now is of a male Asian, unquote. Though some witnesses describe that of the gunman have deferred, Luna said. He cautioned the investigation is ongoing. Quote, there actually is a lot more that we don't know than what we know at this time, unquote, the sheriff said. Officers responded to a dance studio around 10:22 p.m. Saturday and found people, quote, pouring out of the location screaming, unquote, said Captain Andrew Meyer of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. The massacre took place in the Star Ballroom Dance Studio. According to a CNN analysis, the 10 slain victims were pronounced dead at the scene, Meyer said. Quote, there were at least 10 other victims who were transported to numerous local hospitals and are listed in various conditions from stable to critical, unquote, Meyer said. The assailant fled the scene and remains at large Sunday morning, Meyer said. He had no detailed description of the shooter. The carnage unfolded near Monterey Park's Lunar, I think I said Montgomery earlier, it's Monterey Park. Monterey Park's Lunar New Year Festival, which was scheduled to take place until 9 p.m. on Garvey Avenue between Garfield and Alhambra Avenues. That's the basic information that we do know for the moment. So keep your eyes peeled, because, again, another case as to why we shouldn't have guns. Because people go fucking crazy about them. So one article going back to the let's say occupation of Brazil's government buildings while they were away. There's a man, Brazil's army chief, is being fired due to the aftermath of this occupation in their buildings. Brasilia, Brazil. President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva fired Brazil's army chief Saturday, just days after the leftist leader openly said that some military members allowed the January 8th uprising in the capital by far-right protesters. The official website of the Brazilian Armed Forces said General Julio Cesar de Arruda had been removed as head of the army. He was replaced by General Tomás Miguel Ribeiro Paiva, who was head of the Southeast Military Command. Lula, who did not comment publicly on the firing, met with Defense Minister José Múcio, Chief of Staff Rui Costa, and the new army commander in Brasilia at the end of the day. Speaking to journalists afterwards, Múcio said that the January 8th riots had caused, quote, a fracture in the level of trust, unquote, in the army's top levels, and the government decided a change was needed. Which, yeah, I think that was the right approach. I think that's what we should have done here, not with our army, because our army wasn't at fault. They actively did not go in when Trump was trying to pressure them. But I do think that some degrees of reprimanding should have happened to those who prevented more police officers from coming, more police officers from being prepared, and whoever. I think the National Guard in Pennsylvania had attempted to come in, or in Virginia had attempted to come in, but legally they were not allowed to, so they stood at the border waiting for the legal command to go in. So I think they're fine. But there were people who had actively stalled and didn't let the police prepare during the American January 6th riot invasion, the attempted insurrection, of our U.S. Capitol. So I do think that this was the right approach to such a response, to such an attack. Going to Google real quick, Google's parent, the Alphabet company, to lay off 12,000 workers. It's unprecedented, especially in a time where there's massive strikes and labor issues. Google, the Alphabet Inc., is cutting about 12,000 jobs as it faces, quote, a different economic reality, unquote. It said in a staff memo, doubling down on artificial intelligence and axing staff who support experimental projects. The job cuts affect 6% of its workforce and follows thousands of layoffs at tech giants, including Amazon, Microsoft, and Meta platforms, who are downsizing after a pandemic led hiring spree left them flabby in a weak economy. So this is Reuters again. I could keep going into it, but basically they're using the excuse of not making enough money to fire more people so that way that they can minimize their losses. I don't think that that's smart. This is just supposed to be the updates. We aren't going to spend too much on messaging right now. Atlanta protests against shooting deaths of activists briefly turned violent. January 21st, according to Reuters, a protest in Atlanta briefly turned violent on Saturday as demonstrators set a police car on fire and smashed windows of buildings. Marchers had gathered to protest the killing of an activist by law enforcement on Wednesday during a raid to clear the construction site of a public safety training facility that activists have derided with the nickname of Cop City. The demonstration started peacefully, then abruptly escalated with some protesters throwing fireworks and rocks and smashing buildings' windows with hammers, according to a Reuters witness. Okay, so this definitely seems like something I need to research more on, but if this at face value is correct, I don't think that this is the appropriate response for protesters to be escalating the violence. But of course, I think there's a little more to it. As police moved on the marchers, the violence quickly fizzled without anyone injured. A Reuters photographer saw a protester who was carrying a banner being handcuffed by law enforcement. The demonstrators were protesting an incident that occurred on Wednesday when Manuel Terra, 26, was inside a tent and did not comply with officers' verbal commands as law enforcement cleared People's Parks. I need to learn how to say that name. Some activists had been camping there since last year to protest the facility. So again, I could keep going more into this. This definitely seems like a story worth researching a bit more and getting a bit more of an understanding behind it. But one important thing that I think needs to be covered is going back to the grid attack that we saw, I think it was a few weeks ago. State lawmakers proposed power grid protections after attacks. This one is the city of Detroit. This is where this is from. In Raleigh, North Carolina, when gunshots at two electrical substations cut power to thousands of central North Carolina homes for several days in early December, Republican State Rep Ben Moss watched his vibrant district full of family farms, small businesses, and sprawling golf courses become a ghost town. After the latest attack last week on a substation in Randolph County, northeast of Charlotte, Moss is urging fellow lawmakers to prioritize new legislation that would secure the state's critical infrastructure when the legislative session begins in earnest this week. He's amongst the first state legislators to propose power grid protections this year amid a surge in attacks on U.S. substations, primarily in the Carolinas and Pacific Northwest. The recent attack in Moore County, North Carolina, and others in Washington, Oregon, South Carolina, and Nevada have underscored the vulnerability of the nation's far-flung electrical grid, which security experts have long warned could be a target for domestic extremists. So again, I could keep going into this, but this is definitely something I'm coming back to because not only have we touched it before, but I don't think people truly wrap their heads around the state of our energy grid right now. I don't think people understand. We could bitch and complain about how we generate that electricity, but at the same time, our actual electricity grid itself is not only littered with inefficiencies, but it is also littered with vulnerabilities. I want an actual engineer who works on things like this to be able to talk about the pros and cons of the energy grid and how it currently functions. It's a complicated subject. It's an important subject, but it's also very more critically a deep subject. Right now, we have Democratic lawmakers are trying to, it seems, bar insurrectionists from ever holding office, which is fucking fantastic. Albany, New York, Democratic lawmakers in a handful of states are trying to send a message 2 years after the violent attack on the U.S. Capitol. Those who engage in an attempted overthrow of the government shouldn't be allowed to run it. New York, Connecticut, and Virginia are among states where proposed legislation would prohibit anyone convicted of participating in an insurrection from holding public office or a position of public trust, such as becoming a police officer. Yes, I agree. While the bills vary in scope, their aim is similar. Quote, if you've tried to take down our government through violent means, in no way should you be a part of it. Quote, New York's State Senator Brad Hoylman Sigel. My bad, man. I really need to learn how to pronounce your name. But yeah, that's fucking fantastic. But 2 years late, my dude. Like, we also don't have the majority in the House anymore. So unless this is only done into the extent of state level, there's not much I can do to help you with that. I'm not sure how far that one will go. Its greatest potential to be done at a federal level for that. Here's a bit of fun that I saw. Elon Musk takes witness stand to defend Tesla buyout tweets. Oh, this should be good. According to news station KRON, San Francisco, Elon Musk took the witness stand Friday to defend a 2018 tweet claiming he had lined up the financing to take Tesla private in a deal that never came close to happening. The tweet resulted in a $40 million settlement with securities regulators. It also led to a class action lawsuit alleging he misled investors, pulling him into court for about a half hour Friday to deliver sworn testimony in front of a 9-person jury in a full room of media and other spectators. The trial was then adjourned for the weekend, and Musk was told to return Monday to answer more questions. In his initial appearance on the stand, Musk defended his prolific tweeting as, quote, the most democratic way, quote, or unquote, to distribute information, even while acknowledging constraints of Twitter's 280 character limit can make it difficult to make everything as clear as possible. No, just no. Quote, I think you can absolutely be truthful on Twitter, unquote, Musk asserted on the stand, quote, but can you be comprehensive? Of course not, unquote. Musk's latest headache stems from the inherent brevity on Twitter, a service that he has been running since completing his $44 billion purchase of it in October. The trial hinges on the questions of whether a pair of tweets that Musk posted on August 7, 2018, damaged Tesla shareholders during a 10-day period leading up to a Musk admission that the buyout he had envisioned wasn't going to happen. Like, this is all just saying, like, I said something that fucked over people and they lost money and now they're upset with me. Like, I don't fucking care about the angry bashing of millionaires and billionaires at each other. Though I do think it's funny he has to go to court about it. It is a little funny, I'm not going to lie. So the article, CT Insider, abortion at crossroads after midterms with focus on states. In Washington, AP, before Democratic Tina Smith ran for the Senate, she volunteered at a Planned Parenthood clinic in her home state of Minnesota where protesters would confront women as they entered. The experience is on her mind this Sunday, the 50th anniversary of Roe v. Wade, the Supreme Court decision that ensured a nationwide right to abortion until it was overturned last year. Quote, it feels like such an empty day, unquote, she said. The White House is trying to replace that sense of emptiness with outrage and resolve this weekend by demonstrating determination to restore abortion rights, even though there's little chance of progress in Washington. Vice President Kamala Harris is headlining the efforts with a speech in Florida where Democrats fear a renewed attempt to restrict abortions by Republican government Ron DeSantis. Quote, we Can we truly be free if a woman cannot make decisions about her own body? Can we truly be free if a doctor cannot care for her patients? Can we truly be free if families cannot make intimate decisions about the course of their own lives? Unquote. Harris says in excerpts of her speech released before her appearance. The decision for Harris to speak in Tallahassee, the state capital, reflects how the battle lines have shifted since last summer. Now that there's no more national right to abortion, debates over the issue will play out in individual state houses rather than in the halls of Congress or before the Supreme Court. White House officials this past week convened top lawmakers from 8 states to discuss pending legislation. Now, I could keep going on this a bit more, but the TLDR that I understand about why this is kind of important in Florida, being even though it's a right-wing state, why is this, becoming more of a heated issue? I think it has to do in part with the fact that there are certain circumstances with the states around it that make Florida still an abortion safe haven, ironically, because I think the states around Florida all have far more restrictive abortion access or completely banned it altogether. But Florida still has like a certain ban limit that makes it a lot more viable given the conditions, and so a lot of people still flood to Florida for abortions. Which is a little funny given how much of a right-wing nut job state it is and how much they're led by idiocy and just, talking points that affect very little. Or I mean, quite a lot and do very little to help people. But yeah, as far as the updates go, I think that covers a large amount of them that have been going on. I think that this gives us a little more of a well-rounded understanding of things that have been happening lately. So with that being said, I hope you all have a wonderful day. Know that I love you and that Mama Terra loves you. Have a great one, guys.
Tongue-tied in the rain, soaked to my toes, got the chills to the bone. Cold stare through the haze, shrill in my voice and my lungs swell with pain. Call me out by my name, speak to me soft, help me gather my thoughts. Drown it out, plug the drain. Turn the record over, it can't be over. Ah, 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 ah. Write me when you get there, to that better place where you can think straight. Send me love if you can. Manifest the best of your wildest fantasies. I hope you find what you need. Over the hills, sunsets in the trees, soak in the glorious rays. The sun will be out, beating down on your shoulders. Tie a rope round my waist as I venture into the dark. I'll be back by the time you finally know where you are. Tear my ego apart. We are all we are, and we are all but one. Send me up to the stars. The distance between means nothing to me. Or bury me in the sand. After I've done for you all that I can, I'll tell you what I knew, but I've got no concept of what I'm known.